Hi, I'm Anne Hogan. I'm Dean of the College of Performing Arts in the Musco Center for the Arts here at Chapman University in Southern California. And welcome to Musco Connects. Now, here at the Musco Center, we are so excited to be featuring the Paul Taylor Dance Company as part of the Mirabel Musco Contemporary Dance Series. The company is going to be performing on March 18th, and in anticipation of that, I'm here with Michael Novak, the artistic director of the Paul Taylor Foundation, home of the Paul Taylor Dance Company. Michael, thank
Hello,
you so
hello.
much.
Of course.
Hello.
I'm so excited. It's good to see
I
you
am
again.
too. And it's really good to see you. We just had recently the talk with you and Janet Elber of Martha Graham and Dwight Roden of Complexions. And there was just so much to talk about that I'm grateful to you for having a,
Yeah.
a follow up with me.
No, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So, I thought that just to kind of situate the conversation, I wanted to share a few notes about your career.
Okay.
Yeah, and because I think I want people to make sure that they know that before you took on the directorship of Paul Taylor Dance Company, you had a fantastic, critically acclaimed career as a dancer, and you joined Paul Taylor in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first season you were nominated for Clive Barnes Foundation Dance
That,
Award, which is
that's correct.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you went on to, I can't believe these numbers, but if I have it correctly, you danced 56 roles rather in 50 Paul Taylor works, and 13 of them were choreographed on you. So, I
Yes.
mean, wow, congratulations, Michael.
Oh, thank you.
That is amazing. And then in May of 2018, Paul Taylor, who I believe was 88 at the time, named
Mm-hmm.
you artistic director designate,
Mm-hmm.
and you took on the mantle that summer in July. And of course, Paul Taylor passed away not too long afterwards.
Yep.
And since then, I mean, the company has just absolutely flourished, recognized as one of the, premier dance companies in the world. And you've had, national tours and international tours, a season at Lincoln Center, and of course, the upcoming performance at the Musco
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Center. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, no, and there's so much to talk about, but I just have to start with a question I've been dying to ask you.
Yeah.
And I mean, what was it like to be named artistic director designate? I'm like, were you
Yeah.
expecting? Were you
No,
prepared for
no,
it?
we were not expecting it. And I say we, me, the board, staff,
Ah,
dancers, the press. Um, There was no interview process. There was no search.
wow.
There was no putting my resume, into a
Yeah.
pile. And we didn't know that Paul was looking either.
Hmm.
And I never spoke about, well, I didn't speak with Paul much. Our
Hmm.
relationship was very much, choreographer to dancers, a lot of
Right.
nonverbal cues.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so I had always had a passion for arts administration. And when I was getting my undergraduate degree at Columbia University, I was interning at the New York State Council on the Arts. So
Mm.
I was learning a lot about the not-for-profit system, state funding,
Hmm.
city funding, a lot of the mechanisms that are at play to support non-for-profit dance companies. And I also was studying for the GMAT to start looking at business schools because my career was
Uh,
starting to get to that point and I wanted to have, a very solid strategic path. Um, so
and
I didn't
was
tell
Was
Paul
Paul
that.
Taylor? Oh, I was going to say, did
Paul
Paul
didn't know
Taylor
that.
know that?
No,
He
he did
didn't
not know
know
that.
that. Wow.
Um, and so we finished our Lincoln Center season, where we are every year, and I got a phone call that Paul wanted to have a meeting with me basically the next day after our season closed. And
Wow.
um, I didn't know what it was about. I figured it was something significant, and there
Hmm.
was a spectrum. It could be anything from there's a pivot that the company's doing.
Hmm.
Am I losing a job? Is there a restructuring? I
Yeah.
don't know. Because Paul didn't really invite people over
Mm.
that often.
Interesting.
So I went over and he basically said, I've been giving this a lot of thought and I want you to be the one to take over when I'm gone. It wasn't a question.
Hmm.
He didn't ask me if I want to do it. He just said, de facto, this is it. And then whatever my facial expression was, he then said, yeah, you heard me correctly.
Wow.
and I want you to keep dancing. And
Oh, interesting.
we're gonna work on a plan where you slowly start to assimilate responsibilities. Um, and that was kind of it. Um, and I think it's an it was an incredible honor to even be considered by him.
Sure.
Um, and balancing this notion of legacy and history and preservation, but also education and creation, and how do we move the
Hmm.
art form forward without abandoning our past? And those are things that I was always passionate about as an academic and as a dancer.
Hmm.
So while it was unexpected, and it was a very unconventional pick,
Hmm.
as the press indicated, it actually felt right,
Hmm.
that this was something that was ordained that I didn't really have control over, but it felt like the right thing to do. And we
Mm.
were working on about a 2 to 3 year transition plan where I would assume the title of designate and then eventually become artistic director. And he died a couple months later.
Ah,
So it was a
okay.
very, very quick, um, it was less time together than I was hoping for. Um,
Yeah.
so by August of the same year, a couple months later, the board appointed me artistic director, and we had to acknowledge his passing and celebrate it, but also figure out how are we going to start to pivot.
Wow,
Um,
what an intense period for you.
yeah,
That's so it's interesting that given that you didn't have, I mean, I think you had a lot of communication, obviously, with Paul Taylor, but not so much in the verbal realm, and
yeah.
that he didn't know about, all of your training and education and that. Why do you think that it was you that were the ordained one?
I think there was a day in the studio that we were rehearsing together, and sometimes the creative process can be very easy and very fluid.
Hmm.
It's like any job. Like you can have work days that are just great and things get done and there's no
Yeah.
obstacles. And then there's other days that are just they're hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're working with a choreographer and they have an idea in their brain of what it is they want to see materialized, and you as the person or the group of people you're trying to make it happen, and it's just not quite landing. And I would get really insecure when I was working with Paul and we weren't manifesting his vision fast enough. And I would take it personally and I would get frustrated and he would get frustrated. And then there was a point in our working together where I realized, and we didn't talk about it, but there was a
Hmm.
moment I realized that if he's getting frustrated because the momentum's not there or we're not realizing what it is he wants, my job is to be the rock and to be there. And when I say like non-emotional, just you are in this space at this moment in time with him no matter what.
And he can
And
count on you.
and he can count on me.
Hmm.
And when I kind of had that realization, it changed how I worked in the space. And I think it changed our relationship as choreographer to dancer. Um, and there was a lot more trust that started to happen where like I would make choices and he would just kind of like let those choices happen. And um, so I think that was part of it. I think my academic history, he knew about my senior thesis and my love for dance history. And I know he was very passionate about, and he did tell this to me and a couple other dancers, that his concern about my generation and the generations after us is that we're not going to read our history. And we're going to forget why, in our case, all of the icons of modern and contemporary dance, why they did what they did. What were they
Hmm.
protesting? What were they fighting for? For them getting on stage was an act of rebellion. And without knowing those stories and not knowing those like oral traditions of what was happening at the time when those pieces of art were made, his concern was that those pieces would be lost.
Uh,
And he knew that as someone who loves history, that I was like, we can't let that happen. We need our history. We need to
right.
look at it. It needs to be a mirror. It can reflect. It can comment. Sometimes things that were once very timely are all of a sudden timely again.
Hmm.
So he knew that I had a passion for the past as much as I do about the new.
So he could really trust that legacy with you, which,
Yeah.
yeah. And well, it shows well,
Oh, thank you.
clearly. And
It's
it's
going
sort
well,
of,
actually.
And then,
Yeah.
so in the years that you've been artistic director, I mean, what has your evolution been like in that role? And kind of what are
Oh
some of the most
boy.
important things that you've learned, especially being, put in that without uh too much. I mean, you had a lot of
Yeah.
preparation in terms of what you're doing and all of the
Yeah.
factors kind of combining, but wow, all of a sudden you're there. And
I think there were a couple things that were really important for me. One was that when I first became artistic director, I was very focused on digital access and the
Mhm.
importance of performance being available and this notion of digital engagement. And I was really advocating for kind of not a shift away from live performance, but like a both
Mhm.
and.
Right.
And what was interesting is when we entered the pandemic, it was a full stop and reset. And one of the first big lessons I learned from the pandemic, because we were teaching on Instagram and we were creating this virtual content, we were performing in theaters that were empty
Mhm.
and they were streaming out our shows. And there was this moment that I realized that digital can never be a replacement for the real thing, and
Mhm.
that's live in person experiences. And while digital assets can be an amazing tool, they're vehicles to get us to that moment where we're all in the space together, breathing together, having the
Yeah.
same feelings about what it is that we're responding to. Maybe not the
Yeah.
same feelings, but we're having feelings, and then we
Right.
can
And I think
dialogue
so
about
much the
them.
world just realized it's sort of like you don't know
Realize
what
like
you've got until it's gone. And yeah,
this is a living art form.
right.
So I kind of shifted my focus, still managing the social media and digital content creation and stuff like that, but it was this realization that teachers need students in the room to learn
Mhm.
more about them. Choreographers need dancers. Like it's an energy thing.
Right.
So that was a big realization for me in terms of like how do we straddle this live and digital world that we're in.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other thing that was really important for me was how to create a stable platform for dance makers to make work.
Mm.
Because the way our industry works right now, if you're lucky to be part of a founder company like Paul Taylor was the choreographer for 60 years. No one else came in. And he was able to take a lot of risks creatively because he knew the dancers. He knew who they were. He grew with them. So as he got older, they got older. And that relationship building, I think, translates to better work. I think it translates to more risk in work. And what can happen when you start commissioning other choreographers to kind of come in, it can almost feel like a revolving door where it's like you have 60 hours, 90 hours, make a piece and then go. 60 hours, 90 hours.
Yeah.
And how much are these choreographers really? Yes, it's a great opportunity, but what if knowing what they know now,
Mhm.
what would they do if they came back? So, and I'm not a choreographer. So the first thing I wanted to do was figure out how do we set up a resident choreographer model where there's a consistent creative voice that's in the room with the dancers. Um, and how do we stabilize that fiscally? That it's
Mhm.
not this freelance job. Like this is your job, like health, dental, salary. Your job is to make dance and to push the art form forward. And so we've been very lucky in building this platform to have the financial support from patrons to do it. And now we have two resident choreographers, Lauren
Yeah.
Lovett and Robert Battle. And they come to the company from two very different worlds and experiences, but they each capitalize, I think, on the range of Paul's work. Um,
Mm.
so there's something about the intersection of Lauren's experience with New York City Ballet and Balanchine and Paul. And then you have Robert Battle through Juilliard and through Battleworks and through Parsons, who's a Taylor alum, and then Ailey, and like that intersection of what modern dance was and what it was becoming. So, but they're the creative pillars, and that establishing that was a huge goal of mine, and
Mhm.
it's panning really, really, really well.
I mean, it's interesting. I hadn't thought of those synergies between them and Paul Taylor of the, but it makes so much sense for a company that had 60 years of Paul Taylor, and then the opportunity to really like embody that artistic vision.
Yeah.
But when you have, I mean, I guess in terms of thinking about Paul Taylor Company and kind of its what is quintessentially something about that company. And I think now that you have the dancers and they're performing, Lauren Levin and Robert Battle's work, and of course Paul Taylor's and others, they're doing all of these different pieces with different artistic perspectives. What is it that makes an audience say, that's Paul Taylor?
It's Taylor. Um,
Yeah.
it's two things. I think one, it's running, which sounds like a silly thing to say, but choreographers, when they usually come in to work on the company for the first time, almost all of them are so excited to have 16 dancers who run the way we run. Um, flocking like birds. It's something that's very unique to Paul's repertoire, and choreographers love being in a room where that just happens because they've been watching it as aspiring dancers, maybe even as dancers or aspiring choreographers. But the way the Taylor dancers run, and the freedom of it is very much a hallmark of ours. And then we're very athletic. I say like most modern dance is very athletic. Where it sits in our body is different. We're what I call like a hardy company. Like everything comes from the back. Paul was a competitive
Mhm.
swimmer. We're meaty in the thighs. We're low to the floor. Um,
I like that. A
we
Hardy
we
company.
we
That's
move. We're down. We are down. We show
yeah.
you gravity. We don't try to hide it. We show you it and we celebrate it. But that is matched with emotion and expression and not acting per se, but the
Mhm.
sense of when we're performing, like these are real people just doing extraordinary things. There
Mhm.
isn't a facade necessarily, unless it's a character that is a caricature.
Mhm.
Um, but the emotional range of the company is huge. We can
It
be
is.
incredibly funny, almost like slapstick comedy funny, which is rare in modern dance.
It is. Yeah.
And then we can be terrifying in the
Mhm.
works that we put on. And so when audiences come and see the show, emotionally, they go on a ride. Not just with the music or the movement or who the choreographer is. Usually there's the moment you think you know where we're going as a company, or like you've seen everything that we have to offer, I like to catapult you to a different area.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the emotional range of the company is something that I think makes us very accessible internationally,
Yeah. It
combined
is
with that
extraordinary,
power.
and with that, but I think that you really hit on that sense of freedom and the running and that real um you know almost earthy type of groundedness, and
Yeah,
the hardiness that you talked about. That's you just know whatever piece it is, I'm watching Paul Taylor
oh,
Dance
Taylor.
Company,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So do you think, in terms of your leadership of the company, and particularly with the dancers, that the fact that that you knew that repertoire, that you had danced, and you're being a dancer yourself, how
hmm
has that kind of informed your position as artistic director?
Well, I like to say that every generation has a different relationship to the repertory because the repertory was made in a different time. So while I might have danced works from the 1960s and the 1970s, my experience dancing them is not necessarily the same as those who were living it when it was created. So I believe that repertory like really exists. Like you need all the generations. Who are there in the room who are saying, this is 1963, this is Cuban Missile Crisis, this is what was happening in New York City, this is what this like they give you this context and this storytelling that changes how you execute something. And I'm very careful that the farther we get from source, that we don't dilute the poignancy of like kind of the
Right.
core of the work. It's very common that things can get clean and then cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned, and the point that they're what I'll say they're perfect but not right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's something that it's important to me to bring in the original cast members, to have alumni come in, like, don't talk to me, talk to the dancer who was there in 1979 or 1980. Now that doesn't mean that I don't have to make decisions because Paul also he tweaked his dances over time.
Mhm.
So it's very common that we'll have a section or things that kept evolving, and then I have to come in and I have to do enough research that I feel like I can make an educated guess about, was this a Paul change? Was this an injury that happened to get recorded and then it kind of stuck?
Right.
Um, so there's that, and then we have our rehearsal directors, Betty DeYoung. She's been with the company since 1962.
Yeah, she's a legend.
She's still with us. She's still in the studio. Kathy McCann joined the company in 1979. Again, a different era,
Right.
but was with Paul when he was making, a lot of the hits in the 1980s and the early
Mm.
1990s. So this representation of the different generations, I think, combined gives dancers as many crayons in the crayon box, you might say, to figure out what they want to bring
Yeah.
to a role.
And you kind of holding it together where you can really see that your passion for dance history, your training in dance history, your embodied understanding of Paul's work by doing so much of
Yeah,
it, is so important and such a, really helps to maintain that living knowledge of passing
yeah.
through the
And
the
I
generations.
I try to be transparent with the dancers too, and it happened yesterday where I was like, I've researched every video since 1988. It never was perfect.
Yeah.
But I can tell you what themes I've noticed, and we need to figure out how to find what I think we're going for because it's not landing from the front of the room.
Mhm.
So let's just keep trying it. But I try to be aware of not educating them as we put things together, but let them know that like this is the responsibility of legacy. It is conversations. It is, I
Mhm.
found this notebook and this is different than what's on the video. What do we do? And then we talk about it. So the dancers have access to our archive. It's an extraordinary archive. It's huge. So the dancers get access to several videos. They have access to Paul's notebooks.
Hmm.
Um, and
Fantastic.
we pull things out as much as we can to enrich in the dancer's experience, especially when you're bringing back works that haven't been seen in
Right.
20, 30, 40, 50 years.
And of course, when new bits of information or if something is found, it's just going to then reshape,
It's
the
exciting.
perspectives
Yeah.
on that. Yeah. So it's interesting to me that, that Paul Taylor had very much wanted you to continue, at least for a while, as a dancer. Tell me about the decision. When did you feel like, okay, this is the moment where I'm ready
Oh,
to focus exclusively on being artistic director? And what was that like?
it was very soon after Paul died.
Mhm.
And I remember performing on stage, thinking about business work, admin work. And I remember being in the office doing admin work and thinking about I should be cross training right now. I should be working on
Yeah.
my machine, my dancing, my body. And I started to feel like neither one was getting the time and attention that it deserved.
Mhm.
And in light of him being gone and managing press, marketing, the
Right.
board, audiences, it's a very fragile time when a founder dies. And there's a very short window in which an organization can pivot and rise, or I think can kind of stay stagnant. So I was very aware of the talent of my colleagues, frankly, and be like, the only do the things that only you can do. And I'm like, I have people who can deliver extraordinary artistry on stage. I need to do what only I can do. And that is charting a vision forward through all this and
Right. Right.
finding a way to bring everyone with us on this new adventure.
And of course, you
Um,
didn't have that. It was anticipated that you'd have much more of a transition
it was
period and
very
working
quick.
with, but very quick,
Yeah.
right? And yeah. So, well, speaking of you as a dancer, let's talk about your training. And
Yeah.
yeah, for what I can gather, you're from Illinois, and you
Yep.
started, dance when you were about 10.
hmm
How'd you start? What attracted you to dance?
Well, I had tried a bunch of sports, and my parents had a rule that I had to have some after school
Mhm.
extracurricular activity. And
Good rule.
I tried a lot of things and I didn't. I was better at the like you against yourself sports, like swimming or gymnastics. Like it was you and your time or your mark. It was the group sports was not successful.
Yeah.
Um, and we moved to a new neighborhood and there was a dance studio nearby. And I thought, well, let's try it. And I ended up liking it. I ended up being good at it.
What were you studying? Was it ballet or tap or
Jazz and
music?
tap
Jazz
mostly.
and tap. Okay.
Yeah. This is before lyrical
Yeah.
was a thing and contemporary. There was no contemporary yet.
Right. Right.
At least in Illinois. So it was all jazz and tap, and I was kind of like I was heading towards the musical theater route originally, and then my senior year in high school, I did West Side Story, and I was cast as Dream Tony for the Dream Ballet. And then there was this weird moment of like, there's this ballet world that I really hadn't been in yet. And, but there was something about it that enraptured me. And I was like, okay, now what do I do? I love the jazz, love tap, love theater. But then ballet was just something I never even, I was exposed to, but never had inhabited.
Right. Right.
And then that started a whole journey.
And then you eventually were in Philadelphia with the University of the
Hmm.
Arts, and
Yep.
then ended up and you got your BA in dance from Columbia, summa cum laude,
Yeah,
and yeah. So while you were at Columbia, of course, you were dancing in their repertory company there, but also, was what was it like to have this wealth of the whole academic and the
I loved it.
historical and real? Yeah,
Um,
you can tell
so
how
Barnard
important.
College has an extraordinary dance history criticism theory
Mm-hmm.
facet, and the scholars there were just incredible. And I think um, I found a home where my creative brain and my intellectual brain were just
Mm-hmm.
stimulated all the time. And then again, to be looking at dance through the lens of the sociocultural political climates in which dance was being created, how it was responding to things. So it just kind of opened my eyes to a world beyond just performing. And it was there that I found modern dance, and there that I found Paul Taylor. And it was also there that I was cast in Václav Nijinsky's Afternoon of a Faun,
Oh, right.
which is a ballet from the Ballet Russe. Um, and I was part of a reconstruction of that work. This
Really?
is
How interesting.
early 1900s. And there was just something about this notion of history can be alive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just started this whole like modern dance kind of chapter just opened up because of Barnard and Columbia.
And what was the Paul Taylor rep? Was it Oriole? I think they were
Oriole.
doing. Yeah,
I
that's a
did
beautiful piece.
I did Paul Taylor's solo and Oriole for my senior
Oh,
thesis
oh,
project
wow.
or the senior performance. And then
Amazing.
my academic thesis was on George Platt Lynes, who was a ballet photographer, worked a lot with Ballet Caravan, City Ballet. He was a fashion photographer, ballet photographer, but he had an incredible intersection within the art world of New York at that
Mm.
time. So I wrote my thesis on him and how he elevated ballet and modernized it,
I love you were
essentially.
focusing on, on the photography aspect of it. And that
Hmm.
makes sense that you're, capturing those images and then the historical, importance of that and how that contributes to the continuity. Well, as you know, we have an incredible dance department here at Chapman University. And so just for our students, but other university students, what was it like? How did you navigate the transition between studying dance and performing dance in a university environment to then,
Mm.
oh, you're a professional dancer and a professional dancer with Paul Taylor Dance Company, no less?
It was a long journey.
Yeah.
It was not quick. I got into the Paul Taylor Company when I was 27. So I was much older. Um, my path, I was at University of the Arts for my freshman year only. And then I actually dropped out of college. And I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Ballet because my ballet training
Oh,
was not quite where I wanted it to be. Um, So I was freelancing, I was waiting on tables, I was performing with a variety of companies. Then I went to
Mm,
Columbia, and then I graduated from Columbia. And again, I was freelancing a lot. And there are some careers that happen where dancers get jobs maybe even in college or right out of
mhm,
college or right out of high school. There are other dancers who, kind of in my case, like freelance for a lot of
mhm.
companies and don't quite have that break until they're much older. And I think my advice for students is actually advice that I got from Jessica Lange, who's a prolific choreographer who I studied with. And I was young when I was taking class from her. And
Mhm.
she said, it's not about the job, it's about the career.
Oh, wow.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. When you're young, you're looking at the job as as the
Mhm.
career. You're not seeing it as a step. You can't. But like this
You're
is
in the
the
middle
only
of it,
thing. You're the
right? And
middle of
you're,
it.
yeah.
It's happening to you. But her approach in terms of like take the time to chart all the things that start to happen as you build your career. Um, and have patience.
Mm, right.
Don't burn bridges, be a good person, be accountable, reliable, have integrity, all of those things. But everyone's journey is different. And the moment you start comparing your journey to someone else's, it can get it can get tricky and it can get in
Mhm.
the way, it can cloud your vision of what it
Yeah,
is
it's
you want to
confusing,
do.
huh?
Yeah.
About that. Yeah, you're just going to confuse yourself. But it's interesting that you use your sort of your freelance period kind of was in a gap before you went on to finish your degree. So, and I
Yeah.
think that, that the no one's life is a linear narrative, and with dancers it's going to happen at those, as it unfolds, I guess,
No,
right?
you never know. I mean, even the number of times that I got a call, like I was the resume, like I was the second one. Like I didn't get
Hmm.
the job, but I went in the file. And the number of times I got a call a year later, can you move to Detroit? Can you do this? Can you go on this cruise ship? Like I was that second, and I used to be frustrated that I wasn't getting the work, but then I was like, well, something's working because people are
Hmm.
seeing something, but you know, um, and maybe that's the path at this time. And it was
But that's
Paul who
great.
just, but 27 was my first full-time dance job.
Wow, that's amazing. But I think I'm really impressed by that somehow it sounds like you did have this sense of trust that it would all work out, that the day would come. But I think cultivating that resilience, and that's one thing that of course we, work so much with our students here and in your
Yeah,
training, is like you just have to not be shattered by a no, or and
yeah,
encouraged by something. It's interesting you're saying that's
yeah,
not quite a yes, but
yeah.
it means that you're still continuing on the journey, and kind of, and that patience, as you say, which can be really hard.
I mean, I like to advocate for students who are kind of struggling with like, I'm not getting work or where do I go? And I'm like, think of yourself in like 1 year to 2 year time frames. Like,
Mm,
have a goal for 2 years. I'm taking classes, I'm auditioning, this is what I'm doing, and then give yourself a window of time to reevaluate what's working, what's not. But if you kind of just graduate and go and if you just move to New York and you're like hoping and it
yeah,
doesn't happen right away, you're doing yourself a disservice. Like, I'm going to give myself 2 years and I'm going to do da 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 da,
right,
and then I'll reevaluate and I'll see where I'm at from there. But
yeah. That's super
the
helpful though, because I think then it keeps it. It's a strategy for keeping it from getting so overwhelming, and
yeah,
and kind of maintaining a perspective about about what you're doing and where you want to get to eventually.
and
Of
it's
the
okay if you change your mind. It's okay
Yeah.
if you change. It's a lot of people change careers, things
Mhm.
don't work out. Um, Adaptability, I think, is an asset. I
Mhm.
think acknowledging, the changing industry, the landscape of what's
Right.
happening right now. Maybe you thought you had a passion and you actually have an untapped passion that dance might lead you to.
Right.
Um, you don't quite know. And that's something that was amazing about Columbia is so many dancers at Columbia were ballet dancers who were retiring late 20s, early
Mhm.
30s because they started when they were, you know, 15,
16. Yeah.
16, that now they're going into law, now they're going into medicine, now they're becoming physical therapists for dancers, so in life you're going to evolve yourself, hopefully, like
Right.
you do keep growing. So these, it's not about the career, it's not about the job, it's about the career. It's not about like this 1 month in your life, it's about your life. So having that perspective, I think, is
No,
important
I
for
think
students.
that's such great advice. And it also, in looking at the way that a career develops and unfolds as a continuum, also kind of staves off that, oh my God, when I stop dancing, I've lost my identity, or,
Yeah.
which a lot of dancers, go
Yeah,
through. It
it's
takes a long
hard.
time to have to
Hmm.
adjust that. It's something that you've done
Yep.
for so long, and it's a sense of you. But I really love how you framed it as there's kind of no failure. It's just leading you in different directions and choosing different directions, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the kind of going through the pandemic and like that experience of, I remember talking to a patron about this in the middle of everything, was just like find the opportunity, look for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It can be hard. It can be really hard. And it might take time to like find it. But even if you can't find it, put people around you who can look at that with you and say, where's the opportunity? Where is it? What is it behind? Where is it lying?
Yeah.
And because that'll help you in life, not just in the
Absolutely.
dance
Yeah.
career.
And really believing that there always is that
There
opportunity,
always
that
is.
it's not just a block or something. But speaking about education, I want
Yeah.
to ask you about the Taylor Center for Education. And I have to say, Michael, I had the great fortune to visit you in New York City and see your gorgeous new home. I mean, that's just an
Yeah.
amazing space. Yeah. So what's the relationship in looking at the whole Paul Taylor Foundation between the company and the school?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So historically, the school, it was called the Taylor School for about 35 years, and it was kind of like only professional modern classes in the Taylor style for decades. That was it. Um, and we had new directors who started to come in when I was a dancer in the company, and there was this whole notion of like, yes, we're training professionals, but if we're really going to build a school, we have to start with the children. We have to start thinking of like, what does modern dance and creative dance look like, starting with the 2-year-olds and the 3-year-olds, and what's that progression to get you to being a Taylor dancer? So we had a director named Reagan Wood who basically came in and she opened up like that notion of like Taylor for all ages.
Uh-huh.
And so that was kind of like the first phase of expanding what education meant. And then Carolyn Adams came in during the pandemic. Um, and in addition to all of that, Carolyn started to ask this question about where does art sit within social, historical, and political contexts? How are we teaching about dance? Are we just teaching steps and counts? Great. We should also be teaching history and literature and social sciences and poetry and teaching dance through the lens, kind of like a liberal arts approach to dance
Right,
education,
right.
to open
Interesting.
up the dialogue about where dance can intersect with every facet of our lives. Um, and at the same time, Carolyn started exploring this whole notion that like adults have a right to be creative movers too.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a professional to want to experience what it's like to run like a Taylor dancer. So now we're dealing with many, many ages within dance, but also dance as it relates to all these other art forms and subjects. And then about a year and a half ago, our board was in this position coming out of the pandemic because real estate in New York, commercial real estate, was vacant. So a lot of landlords were sitting on these empty office buildings with no tenants. And so we were looking, is there an opportunity here? Because we can't keep growing the school if we don't have studios
Right.
in which we can be hosting different
So you're
schools.
always looking for an opportunity, Michael.
Yes. So one of our board members actually, I think about 2 years, maybe like 2022, he kind of had a sense of the market and he was like, now, go now. Shop for spaces now. So we did, and we found a landlord who loved dance, wanted to support a company. It was two floors of this office building, and we basically blew out the ceiling and the floor so that it's a double
Oh,
height
did you?
studios.
Oh,
It's
wow.
23,000 square feet of studios in collaboration with our landlord. So our new director of education now, Amy Marshall, she's taking everything that Reagan and Carolyn did, but she's looking at all of it now through the lens of fitness and functional longevity, is what
Mm,
we're calling it. There's a big movement right now in terms of Pilates, yoga, a lot of ballet bar classes, like
right.
bar fitness, you might say. But this notion of like, how are we all taking care of ourselves functionally? And how can it complement dance training? So Amy's coming at this with several degrees in physiology and kinesiology. She's a personal trainer. So now we're adding this notion of like, how are we actually physiologically training holistically dancers? And if they don't want to be a dancer, they just want to be able to like bend down and pick up the groceries, that it's functional wellness that we're teaching.
Mm,
So all of that is happening. The Taylor School in its name is now exclusively for K through 12. It has its own department. We have a huge outreach program here in New York City where we reach thousands and thousands of students per year through our outreach. Um, then we have our professional training programs, we have our adult classes, we have our fitness and wellness initiatives. So it's
wow, it's
really
really a
it's
complex,
rethinking, how are we actually teaching about dance?
yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
I
so it's a
love
great
what you're
moment.
saying.
It's
It
exciting.
is, and it's a beautiful space. I mean, and but I think it's really interesting. So much of what you're saying about both understanding the cultural historical context and the moment, and the those histories, but also the commitment to wellness and functional health and is that's really that kind of describes what we're doing here at Chapman University in our
Mm,
dance program as well. And I
yeah.
think that it's a really interesting moment in dance education because there was a time where all that other stuff was sort of you had to go out and find it,
Oh
if
yeah.
you wanted to,
Hmm.
and but this, I mean, what you're describing here to me is just it's this beautifully holistic place where and I also love that it's a intergenerational space for dancers too,
It has to
and
be. It has to
yeah,
be.
yeah,
And students having access to the dancers, seeing them take class, seeing them in the hallway,
mm,
there's a definite, it's not isolated. It's meant to feel like, like young dancers look up to the company members, like I did when I
right,
was, taking classes in Chicago. Like
right.
it is, you aspire to that. And that's a powerful thing too. So it was also trying to create a space that facilitated that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's wonderful. And I think yeah, and actually of really seeing the dancers in doing their own work, going to rehearsals, seeing how they actually function as that. It's terrific. So let's talk about Paul Taylor Dance Company, March 18th at the Musco
Yes.
Center for the
Yes.
Arts, where it's
Yes.
interesting because we're still, having discussions about the repertoire, and there's just such a wealth of choices,
Yeah.
but we know that we are going to be here. We're going to include
Oh,
Esplanade. That
yes.
that's
Yep.
amazing. And I just because it was interesting when we were talking before about one of the quintessential things about Paul Taylor Company and its dancers and the running. I mean,
Hmm.
and I just it's such a
It's a lot.
beautiful piece, and I always have so moved by the way that Esplanade takes, running and skipping and things and just puts it together in this
Hmm.
just so poignant and in fascinating way that, that it kind of transforms those kind of what we might think of as
Yeah.
like basic movement, So, and it's 50 years old, right?
And it's 50 years old. Yep. Uh-huh.
Wow. So tell us a bit then about the history. What was the
Esplanade.
moment? Yeah.
So Esplanade, so kind of what was happening in dance in the 19 or in modern dance in the 1930s and 40s, and kind of in like modern art, modern music. You had a very small group of artists who were asking these big questions like, what is dance? When is it dancing? When is it not? When is it art? When is it not? When is it music? John Cage, like banging something or the sound of rain. Is that music? Like, so you had this group of renegades who were trying to figure out, like, when does something become an art piece? So, but they were all collaborating, right? So Paul Taylor was asking himself, like, can found movements, running, reaching, touching, skipping, jumping, like, can that be dance or not? But a lot of people who were exploring that were doing it with modern music, more like soundscapes or silence, even, including Paul. And the last thing they would do would take this like modernist principle and combine it with something old, like Bach.
Bach.
And Paul had done some dances to Bach before. One specifically that like was it was an interesting experiment. Um, he had done some work to Handel, and Paul had a proclivity to Baroque music. Baroque inspired him in a way that is very, very famous, actually. And when Paul started kind of combining these like modernist ideals with this Baroque music, he lost a lot of friends. A lot of his contemporaries
Really?
in the modernist group, like you are breaking the credo. We do not
Wow.
use old music. But it was new for Paul. It felt
Mhm.
modern to Paul. So Esplanade comes along and he had just retired from dancing and he had been experimenting with this idea, right? But the story goes that he saw a woman running for a bus in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And there was something about that. And maybe it was the urgency, maybe it was the freedom of it, the humanness of it.
Mhm.
There was something about it that just really caught his eye. And so that's happening. And then 1974 World Series, baseball players running and sliding into home plate.
Uh-huh.
Um, People ice skating, like walking, just these little things that Paul saw everywhere. And this music by Bach, it's two violin concerto that he fused together, which upset the classical musicologists who
Oh, I
like you do
bet it
not you do
did.
not cut a concerto.
Right.
And Paul was very notorious for like I'm going to take one from here and two from here,
Yeah.
um, and Paul basically spliced together two pieces of Bach. Well, it's two concerto, five different sections, and to this beautiful, glorious Baroque music, he created choreography where people are running, skipping, falling, reaching, holding, not holding, and he created an entire world. And it's one of the few dances of the 20th century that was hailed a masterpiece on its premiere critically. Um, that people knew when they saw it, they had just seen a masterpiece of modern dance.
Yeah, you admit it's so special and it's so it looks like it was choreographed yesterday, you know? I mean,
Yeah, it still feels a
it's
bit
yeah.
avant-garde and a little like, oh wow, this
Yeah.
is it's edgy, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and
But
we've
it's
been touring
interesting of
it all
how
the world.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting how that was such a big deal to make a choice with the music. And then on the one hand, that this was like a radical thing to do by using, Bach. But then I love Paul Taylor's kind of slightly irreverent attitude towards it of, well, we can take bits and bobs of Bach and kind of,
Yeah.
string them together. It's fantastic.
He didn't read music. Most people, he was
Mm,
not like George Balanchine. Paul did not read music, but his ear was uncanny how he heard
mm-hmm.
rhythm. Um, and how he would create choreographic phrases that sometimes juxtaposed or worked against what you were hearing, and it
Right.
created this dissonant feeling, both when you're watching it and when you're dancing it. But then when he would make them align, you'd get like you'd have this tension that would build as a phrase was building, and then you finally get to this huge, melodic moment, and that's where Paul's movement phrases sync with the music phrases, and it's glorious.
It is. It's really, it's just, it's a beautiful piece. And well, we're so excited to have that. I'm looking forward to working with you about, of these
We have a
incredible
couple
choices
we
of
have a
what
couple
we're,
world premieres. Audiences are kind of like, well, how do you program and stuff like that? And I always have ideas and I have like a starting point. But then with world premieres, sometimes when you land on something really incredible, it means having to rethink
Right.
what you might bring to audiences and if this is the right piece for your audience. So
Yeah.
we're heading into tech rehearsals next week with our world premieres, and then you'll get an email from me because I might have
Okay.
some ideas. Um, but it's about, you know your audience. You know what they want out of an evening of dance, and you know what we do. And so it's really, it might take a little bit longer, but we curate every program for every venue.
You
It's
do. You
not
do. I
a cookie
really,
cutter. It's just not a model that we believe in. And it takes more time, but I think it's more meaningful for the audience to know that like this is for you.
yeah.
This was handpicked, to create a unique experience. So
No, it means a lot to us here that the thoughtfulness that's putting this evening together, and well, I'm looking forward to continuing that process with you
yeah.
and having the company here. Michael, thank you so much. I know
Thank
how busy you
you.
are, and
Yeah, of
this
course.
was wonderful. I really appreciate your taking the
Great.
time.
Thank you. See you soon.
Okay. Okay, see you
Okay.
soon. Thanks so
Okay.
much, Michael.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.